Those eyes disguise our hide. Bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. I am your host, Matthew M., and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 16. How are we already in June? Like, real talk, how is that a thing? I don't know. I think we stepped into a time warp during the pandemic, and I don't think we ever came out because I don't know how half the year's gone. But anyway, I'm super excited to be here. I'm super grateful to have all of you listening today with us. And let's get into a great episode. As I said, episode 16, we're going to be talking about tradition number 4. We're going to be answering more questions. We're going to be talking about my favorite moment of the week, as always, and giving them clean time shout-outs. So we go any further, we have to give a big thank you to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily. If you are looking for any kind of event staffing or party staffing, or you're looking for a job, make sure to check out her information listed in the description below. Have to give a huge thank you, as always, to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and Mad Decent Records for the amazing theme music that we have been bestowed upon us. Anything, one of my favorite songs. All the download streaming information is below. Check it out. Also, huge thank you to our VIP supporters. These are the people on Patreon that help build this podcast by making donations, as I said, on Patreon. And they are Alex B., Cindy, Stephanie, Shar, Clint, and Alex T. Thank you, guys. We're currently using that money that's coming from that to boost our marketing ability and hopefully get this podcast out to more people and therefore help more people. So if you're looking to help support this podcast, please head over to Patreon. You can always get there by going to www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. In the top right corner are all of the social media links, and that's where you'll find Patreon. And if you help subscribe or help boost this podcast by subscribing on Patreon, you will get one of these awesome Clean and Filthy podcast stickers to display on your car, water bottle, wherever. I appreciate it so much. So thank you all for all of the support. Have to give a huge thank you to everybody for the downloads, to our new listeners. I know, as I say each week, I've been putting in work on Twitter, so we've been getting some new listeners, some new downloads. I really, really appreciate it. Last week, we cracked the 500 downloads mark by a lot, actually. So, shout out everybody for that. Our numbers keep growing from new places. We're getting new listeners, and I love each and every one of you. So if you are new, welcome. Hopefully you hear something you like, and next week you won't be new. And if you do hear something you like, please share this podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on all the social media and, give us a rating wherever you consume your podcast from. It really does help us grow. Also, if you are watching right now on YouTube, what up, chat? We get a live stream going every single Tuesday, 5 p.m. over on YouTube. We get a bunch of people in the chat. It's a lot of fun. If you're currently on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you get a notification whenever we go live. And if you are watching on YouTube, please still, if you don't mind, throw us some downloads wherever you get your podcast from. And if you're listening to this podcast on a directory and you want to take part in the live stream, head on over to YouTube. Very simple to get all the information for social media, like I said, off of the website, and you can follow along live. So I love doing this live option. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm looking at ways to grow it as well. So we've got some things in the works. Well, more information in the future to be determined. So want to give an explanation of what we do here, what we don't do, who we are, and all that. Again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery, and this is the Clean and Filthy podcast. We are a 12-step recovery-based podcast. Every single week, we are here at 5 p.m. live on YouTube, as I said, with episodes available for download wherever you get your podcast from. We're listed on all the podcast directories. So welcome. Shout out to everybody who is here. And what do we do? Well, we are here to help raise awareness, answer questions, help get the idea of what recovery is out to the public and help people. At the end of the day, I want to help people. I want to help people as I was helped by getting into recovery, by the 12-step recovery model. And the way that I found to do that is by carrying that message and giving back to everybody. So if you're an addict in recovery, welcome. If you're an addict who's not in recovery, welcome. If you're somebody who, has family members or friends in recovery, welcome. If you're somebody who knows nothing about recovery and hasn't been apparently directly affected by by addiction, welcome. Because this podcast is for anyone and everybody who wants to learn about recovery, who wants to learn about the growth that we do in recovery. And also the growth we do as human beings. As I always say, recovery isn't about not using drugs. Recovery is about learning and becoming a better human being. So even if you're not an addict, guess what? There are things within the 12-step recovery model that can directly apply to your life. And maybe you'll hear something you like. If you do, please make sure to share it. But I got to talk about what we are not. This is not a 12-step meeting. To make sure I stay in line with the traditions, I will not be speaking from a point of authority or identification with any specific fellowship. We won't be discussing my home group. I won't be making recommendations about treatment centers or recovery residences or sober livings or any of those type of things because I want to stay in line with the traditions. And I want to make sure that at the end of the day, this is a podcast of unity, helping carry that message and become a beacon of hope for recovery worldwide. So this does not replace going to a meeting or calling your sponsor or working steps. This is not supposed to replace anything that maybe you're already doing within your recovery. But hopefully this can be an added bonus to your recovery. This can be a place to feel a sense of community, to have questions answered, to feel camaraderie with other recovering addicts or just other people who are interested in recovery. That is the point of what we're doing here. And that is our main goal, to make sure that we can help more people and carry this message that, has saved my life and has saved tens of thousands of people's lives around the world. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do. Of course, if you have any questions about specific meetings or specific fellowships or how to get to a sponsor or how to get to a home group or anything like that, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me directly at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or head over to the website. All the social media tags are listed there. You can send me a message wherever you like because I want to be able to help people in every way possible. But there are certain things, in order for me to stay in line with the traditions, that we just won't be discussing on this podcast because I never want to speak from a point of authority about any one fellowship or any one meeting or anything like that. I want to give my experience, strength, and hope on what has worked for me while staying in line with the traditions so that we can hopefully help other people. So If you have questions that we don't get into here on the podcast, please send them over. I would be more than happy to discuss them, to get more information to you, to help however I can. But certain things we just won't be talking about on this podcast. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that, and going into it, have the correct expectations. We don't want there to be incorrect expectations, because those lead to resentments. We'll get into all that at another time. So that's what we do. That's who I am. That's who we are. And well, let's get into our first segment, y'all.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
Here we are in the lab. This is the part of the show where every single week we discuss a different step, tradition, concept, or spiritual principle from 12-step recovery. We discuss it, give some information about it. I, give a little bit of my personal experience, strength, and hope on the topic. And it's just a good opportunity to understand some things. Because I know for me personally, when I got into recovery, looking at these steps and these traditions and these concepts and spiritual principles, it all sounded so foreign to me. Alien language. So my goal here is to try and give a little bit of information, not too much. Don't want to overwhelm anybody, but at least give a little bit more understanding than maybe we would get just simply walking into a meeting. And that's what we do in this part of the show. So this is Experience, Strength, and Hope. I'm not trying to give my opinion on these things. This is stuff that I've experienced throughout my personal recovery experience, through my interactions with the literature and with being of service. That's what we do in this section. So we are officially on episode 16, which means, because of my numbering, that we're on tradition 4. Episodes 1 through 12 sure were easy when it came to numbering, I gotta say. Step 1, episode 1. Step 5, episode 5. Now we're on tradition 4, and it's all screwy. But it's okay. We learn, we progress. Progress, not perfection. That part. So, we're first going to give a little background of the traditions. If you are not familiar with the 12-step model and the 12 traditions, I highly suggest heading back and checking out episodes 1 through 12 for the steps, and then the previous 3 episodes as well to get traditions 1, 2, and 3. These traditions really do build on each other just like the steps do, so it's really important to have an understanding of everything that we've covered up to this point. So, maybe give this a pause and then head over and check out some of our other episodes. That is not just my ploy to get more downloads. I promise. I'm wanting to make sure that the information comes across as clearly and as understandably as possible. So that would be the reasoning. As we talked about before, traditions are that next level of recovery. The steps are the basis that we build everything within our recovery on. They are very much the entry-level prerequisite type of classes. Now we are into graduate study type stuff, 300, 400, all that. That's the level 500, 600. I don't know how high universities in America go in terms of numbering. Like when you get to a graduate, like to a doctorate degree, is it like an 800 level class? I don't know. I stopped at a bachelor's. So somebody out there who has experience in the master's and doctorate level, holla at your boy, because I'm curious now. That's just how my brain works. So after that little tangent, I digress. Again, the traditions are that next level of recovery knowledge. We go deep. We go deep into these. It's not just basic stuff, because the traditions, really don't tie into that day-to-day just stopped using drugs type of vibe. They're much more, about the fellowship in general, or the groups, or service work, or the things that keep the fellowship operating as the fellowship. Whereas the steps are much more tied to my personal experience within my personal journey through drug addiction. Traditions, we go places with them. So, as I've said before, I want to make sure to read this tradition as it says, but because I want to stay in line with the traditions, I will be blurring out, censoring the specific fellowship, name that is used. So if you hear a beep, it's expected. So what does Tradition 4 say? It says, every group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups or as a whole. All right. We're going to get into this. We're going to break this down. Like I said, there's so many levels to it. We can't just say like, oh, hey, this is what it means. Whereas with step 2, it's like, okay, higher power. Got it. All right. Step 3, higher powers will. Got it. Checks out. Makes sense. Step 8 and 9, amends. Cool. Traditions, though, it's not just a one little thing. There's a lot of stuff to it. There's levels to this shit. So, got to talk about the spiritual principles. That's what we do. That's our vibe. We always look at the spiritual principles that are tied into the traditions. And I will always say that the list of spiritual principles that I give during the traditions, that's the abridged version. Because when you get into tradition work, there are so many spiritual principles that come into play. These are the ones that I personally feel tie into this tradition, more than others. And that is open-mindedness, understanding, independence, freedom, trust, unity, responsibility, creativity, consistency, and obviously autonomy. So we're going to really get into that last one. We first got to look at the fact that Tradition 2 and Tradition 4 are very tied together in terms of not governing. Tradition 2 teaches us all about group conscience. It asks, it says that our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. Now, Tradition 4 asks us to let that group conscience that we developed in Tradition 2 to be our guide and not govern at the group level. And it also ties in with Tradition 3 because, Tradition 3 frees us from judging other members. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop using. Again, if you haven't listened to episode 15 on Tradition 3, I'd say check that out. And now Tradition 4 frees us from judging other groups. And we're going to get into that element of it as we get further through this tradition. But first off, we got to look what autonomy means. We got to look at, what being autonomous truly means. And the dictionary definition says having the right or power of self-government, undertaken or carried on without outside control. So what does this mean for a group level? This means that every group has ground to stand on and grow on its own, develop a personality of its own. But just because a group is autonomous, that doesn't mean that other groups don't help. Even though each group within the fellowship is its own entity, there is a lot of cooperation between groups. There can also be conflict between groups, but there can be a lot of cooperation. If one group might be struggling a little bit, other groups will rally together and help. That's what they do. But let's look at, before we even get any further, let's look at what a group is from a fellowship perspective. What is the definition of a group within a fellowship? So the literature says that any group that meets regularly at a specific place and time for the purpose of recovery, provided that it follows the 12 steps and traditions. And there's a couple other little bullet points in it. It says, within one of the IPs for the group handbook, it says, that the members are addicts, that the group is self-supporting. And we're going to get into these little bullet points in further episodes as we go further through the traditions. But it says, they're self-supporting, that they have no opinion on outside issues, and that there's a single goal of recovery through the application of the 12 steps of that fellowship. They might meet at different times or at different locations. They might have different formats. We've talked about before an open meeting versus a closed meeting, an open group versus a closed group. It might have, a speaker. It might be a topic group, a topic meeting. It might be a tag meeting. It might be what we call God sticks, which is like random sticks with spiritual principles that get pulled, and you share about that. It might be literature study. They might be birthday meetings. They might, be a men's group or a women's group or an LGBTQ plus group. Because every group, it says in the literature that every group has a niche to fill. And this is so true. Because when you look at something as diverse as a worldwide fellowship, one size is not going to fit all, period. And that's the fact. What is appealing to me might not be appealing to somebody else. Where I feel comfortable receiving the message of recovery, someone else might feel completely uncomfortable. So that's why, we say that there's no one size fits all for groups. Because, if we all did recovery the exact same way, it wouldn't work for anywhere near as many people. If the reason why jobs work is because they found a streamlined, specific way of, okay, this is how you do this job. This is how you get the most out of it. Well, we don't have that with recovery because we're human beings and we are a diverse group of people. You ever doubt the diversity within the fellowship? Go to a convention. Go to a convention and look out at 1,500 people that you would never see at any other collective. The types of variety within this massive sea of people would never be in the same room if it weren't for recovery. So that speaks to the level of diversity that we have within the fellowship. And again, that is why we guard autonomy so carefully. Because if we're trying to set something up and saying, this is the way you recover, this is the type of meetings you have, these are the type of groups you have, that's going to be horribly unattractive to a lot of people. The things that are attractive to me, period, whether it's recovery, whether it's fashion, whether it's architecture, whether it's cars, whether it's, the opposite sex, those are completely different than a lot of other people. So we have to make sure that recovery has that same diversity in it. That's why we say so often, if you try a meeting and you don't like it, try another one. And then try another one. Because if they were all the same, technically, you go to one meeting, you don't like it, you don't like any of them, right? If they were all the same. But that autonomy allows them to be so diverse and set up so differently than another one. And that might be the thing that vibes most with you. And that's an interesting thing because I know within my recovery, the things that first vibed with me are a lot different than the things that vibe with me now. Again, why having that group autonomy is so important. Because if all that was around were meetings like the meetings that I, really vibed with when I first got clean, I probably still wouldn't be in recovery. But having that creative freedom allows groups to grow and to develop their personality and develop their structure and develop their vibe. And that might sound weird to somebody who's not in recovery, who hasn't gone to meetings, who hasn't been a part of a home group, who hasn't been involved, within groups. That might sound weird. But for anybody who has gone to meetings, you know what I'm saying when I say the vibe. There are just vibes about and within different groups, both positive and potentially negative. But that's how it is. It says in the literature, that autonomy allows each group and its members to recover in complete creative freedom. Not based on one specific thing. There are tenets within 12-step recovery that we follow, obviously. But from a group perspective, that autonomy allows us to process and work through the steps and the other tenets that we follow in our own creative ways. And that's a beautiful gift for somebody like me. Because once you start telling me I have to do something some way, like that it can only be this way, that part of my brain wants to challenge that. And the group autonomy allows that creativity within my recovery to come alive. The group personalities to come alive. And there are some group personalities. It allows for groups from different areas or different regions or different parts of the world to operate so differently, but still work. That is the beauty of it. That is the beauty of the fact that the fellowship still works regardless of what part of the country, part of the world it is, because of the fourth tradition. Because we have that autonomy to build whatever it is that works, we then can carry the clear message of recovery within it in our own special little ways. And you'll get different experiences. You'll go to meetings in a different area, and it might be completely different. Most of the meetings that I was, started at didn't clap after somebody shared. But then you go to meetings in other areas, and they clap. You go to some meetings in certain areas. And I went to a meeting in Idaho one time. And I walked in there, and I didn't know anybody except the one person that I went with. And they did their meeting so differently. And there was that little part of me, I was early on in recovery, but there was that little part of me that was like, this meeting's wrong. They don't do it the way I do it. So there was that little moment. Obviously, I hadn't, worked traditions. I don't even think I really knew what group autonomy was at this point. I had 6 months clean, 7 months clean. I don't think I even really knew what the fuck group autonomy actually meant. But it didn't matter, because even though it was different, even though it was a weird vibe, even though it was something that was unfamiliar to me, the end goal was the same, carrying the message of recovery. So it can definitely be a weird thing, but it's also a beautiful thing to see how recovery can operate so differently from place to place, but it still works because of that one common goal. And when we keep that our primary purpose first, then it doesn't matter how we deliver the message. It doesn't matter how we deliver that. So even when these surface areas are different, which they are a lot of times, the end goal is still the same. And that's such a beautiful thing. That's such a beautiful thing to see so many different people and so many different cultures and just vibes doing their own thing, but all still part of the greater cause and the greater good. And that's why, because of group autonomy, we can find what works for us and we can leave the rest. And like I said before, what works for us at one point might not be the same thing that works for us at another point. So we have that ability to find that out because there's group autonomy. And regardless of all those meeting formats or the different factors that are in place that I mentioned above, the function of them is the same. And it says in the literature that the function of a group is that it is a vehicle for the message of recovery. Now, you know me. I'm a car guy. So I saw the word vehicle, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be a fun analogy. Our wheels started spinning, right? So check it out. This is a perfect way to look at it. Not everybody likes the same thing when it comes to cars, right? There are some people who could not care less about a car. It is a modus of transportation, if you will. That's it. Nothing else. And then there are people like me who love cars more than is probably healthy. Like on a much more deep level, not quite sexual. I don't know. There's a couple. Whew. Anyway, but on a much deeper level. Okay, so even if we take all the, car people, there are people who think the nicest, most beautiful car is like a 69, nice, Eleanor Shelby Mustang. That would be the best thing ever. There are others who say, nah, you give me a 1964 Chevy Impala on 100-spoke wheels slammed on the ground. You have others that would say the best possible thing you could have is a lifted Jeep with a supercharger in it. You have people that say, nah, the nicest car you could have is a luxurious Mercedes Maybach. You got people like me who say the nicest you could have goes 300 miles an hour and costs, multiple houses. And that's the same thing within recovery. Because if all those people aren't wrong based on what they think the nicest and their preference is for cars and what their vehicle would be, then it's the same thing applies to groups. There's no one size fits all. I can't tell somebody that they're wrong because they like something in a different way. It's about finding what works. It's about finding what is the best vehicle to carry that message. And then because of Tradition 4, it allows that group to carry that message in that way. As we always say, the primary purpose, the one goal is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. This allows us to provide a suitable and reliable environment for personal recovery and to promote such recovery. The autonomy of a group becomes a tool for recovery when we remember our primary purpose. Our personal autonomy becomes much more powerful when we know our own purpose and have a sense of meaning in our lives. That comes straight out of the literature. So as long as we keep the primary purpose first, then it doesn't matter after that. As long as we keep the primary purpose first, how we deliver the message, if it stays in line with the traditions, is completely up to us. So we'll get to that second part here in a second. We'll talk about, when group autonomy can affect other groups or the fellowship as a whole. We'll get to that in a second. But if it is simply looking at how we carry the message and we're keeping our primary purpose first, then we have those diverse ways, to develop that message. It says in the literature, it says, as long as carrying the message is our first priority, all of our diverse methods help us to reach addicts and to form the kind of connections that will sustain us. And those type of connections and what will sustain me could be vastly different than the type of connections necessary to sustain you or him or her or them. And that's what this tradition allows. It allows for groups to build that different vibe, that vibes with any kind of addict. When somebody says, oh, I didn't like that, I couldn't find a meeting I liked, it seems impossible to me. Because there are so many meetings for so many different niches with so many different vibes and energies, and to not be able to find something in a worldwide fellowship with tens of thousands of meetings every single week, especially during the pandemic, where we could go to meetings anywhere and everywhere at all hours of the day and find something that works. And if something doesn't, look for something else. That just always seems just crazy to me. So within this concept of autonomy, by understanding the fourth tradition, it also builds and allows for personal autonomy. Because we can be true to ourselves and honest about our experience. I'm able to be me. The loud, boisterous, energetic, smiling, happy, joyous, and free type of motherfucker. I'm allowed to be that. I'm not confined based on anything. As we talked about last week in Tradition 3, there's no, resumes. There's no personality tests. There's no, anything like that. You have to operate like this to be an addict. No. I'm a member when I say I'm a member, so now I have this autonomy to be me. And does that mean it's always going to be the best thing to some people? No, I know there's people who don't like me because of me, but I get to be me because of the personal autonomy that I have developed within this tradition by understanding what, group autonomy is. And I get to help my group develop its vibe, develop its setup, its personality. Now, of course, I have to be responsible within that because my personal autonomy I still have to think about how it could affect other groups or the fellowship as a whole. That's something that I can truly say I have thought about. I have a sticker on my car that says what fellowship I'm in. And I think about, well, if I cut this guy off and then drive 100 through a school zone and they notice that symbol, I could be doing damage to the fellowship as a whole. So personal autonomy ties into responsibility as well. That freedom ties in with responsibility. And we're gonna touch on that in a second. But it says in the literature, it says that honesty, speaking of, the honesty that we can share from because of our personal autonomy, that honesty is the most powerful tool we have in our efforts to carry the message. That honesty is what is attractive to addicts like us. The honesty that we hear in meetings, when people share honestly from the heart, that's the type of thing that I have found personally to connect the most with. Somebody who can quote literature, cool. Somebody who's got tons of clean time, cool. But those honest, in the trenches, dark, dirty, grimy ass, that's where the connections, in my opinion, are the strongest, for my recovery. So that's what, we are allowed to do within our personal autonomy. And as we talked about, previously, the unity that we have never equals uniformity. And I'm so glad it does, because imagine if every single meeting you went to, everybody was wearing the same clothes, everybody shared the exact same way about the exact same topics, about this with the same tone or demeanor. That would be a cult. That would be some everybody is in hooded robes and we all say the same thing. That's not attractive to me. I don't think that would be attractive to many people. So the fourth tradition allows us to be ourselves, to allows groups to be themselves, as long as it's not detrimental to other groups or the fellowship as a whole. And that's a beautiful freedom. But before we go into the second part of it, I do want to mention the fact that groups are autonomous. This tradition ties in directly with groups, but service bodies are not, and they do follow a specific set of guidelines. Now, this might be, next level for some people who maybe have never done anything within service, part of a subcommittee or part of, an area or a region. But these different subcommittees and service bodies are not autonomous the way that groups are. And this is for a specific reason. It's not because they're trying to govern or say this is how you have to do things, but it's because it streamlines everything for the process of getting things done. It makes it easier to transfer the information to the next, service, to the next chair, the next person who's taking over that service commitment, if there's a set structure to it. Because if we're just out here willy-nilly just running shit however we want to run shit, it's going to make it difficult when we transfer things. It's going to make it difficult to get business done. So I just wanted to put that little aside in there so that's, understood. If somebody gets into service and they're like, hey, I should be autonomous. Fourth tradition. I listened to this loud motherfucker on the Clean and Filthy podcast, and he said that the fourth tradition means groups are autonomous. Well, it doesn't apply within service bodies from that direct perspective. It does in ways that are deeper than we're going to get into on today's episode. So we got the first parts of it done, but now we got to look at the second part of this tradition, where it says, unless it's affecting other groups or the as a whole. From here on, rather than going, we'll just say fellowship. Cool. So it says in the literature, it says, like group conscience, autonomy can be a two-edged sword. Group autonomy has been used to justify violations of the traditions. If a contradiction exists, we have slipped away from our principles. Now, this is where we get into that element of freedom, and the fact that freedom and responsibility really work hand in hand. Because with freedom, we have to look at how these decisions that we're free to make could impact other groups or the fellowship as a whole. This tradition, it says this tradition offers freedom and establishes boundaries for us in ways that specific rules or policies never could. That's why we base everything within the fellowship off of, spiritual principles, off of these traditions. And again, they're a blueprint. Are they always perfectly followed? No. Can they be, used in ways to justify things? Yes. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But we have to start looking at how our, not just, from a group perspective, but how our personal perspective can impact others and people around us and groups around us and potentially the fellowship as a whole. Because it says right there in the tradition that we're autonomous until that occurs. And if that's occurring, that's something we got to look at. And this has been happening at times. There was a situation, especially because of the pandemic, where my old home group in Las Vegas, because there weren't enough people that, ready to go back in person, another group was started at the same time. And it was kind of started out of, in my opinion, somewhat of a resentment, because that's my opinion. But the other side of it says, well, hey, there was a need that needed to be filled. People wanted to go to in-person meetings, so we started our own meeting. So looking at that, how does it affect other groups as a whole, or as other groups or the fellowship as a whole? And that can get difficult when we're trying to balance carrying our primary, carrying the message, which is our primary purpose, to help other addicts, with how does it affect other groups. I have another example. Here in Arizona, there's a group that started in the middle of the pandemic that decided they weren't going to be a part of the area because the area, had specific guidelines that had been voted on to follow. And this group didn't really want to do that. And that's their autonomy to do. So they started a meeting, which again, I think that's great. You filled a void, whatever. But in naming the group, they decided to put a profanity in the title of the meeting. Now we got to look at how could that affect the fellowship as a whole. Because it says in the literature that if our behavior as members is still destructive and selfish, we will once again have difficulty meeting openly. If the public reputation of the fellowship is somehow impaired, addicts may die. And that's one side of it. This, in my opinion, this could negatively impact people's perception of the fellowship. And I also do a lot of work within public relations. So when I see something, embracing my fellowship and using profanity, when obviously I don't give a fuck about profanity.
That part.
I fucking love fucking profanity.
That part.
Obviously that's not an issue. But the thing is when we start looking at how our decisions and how our group decisions could impact the fellowship as a whole, that to me is where it becomes an issue. And I understand that there are addicts who see that profanity in the title and are like, that's my vibe. I get that. And that is a niche to be filled. But there can also be people who see that and immediately make a negative assessment of the fellowship as a whole. To me, that is where it becomes a tradition violation. Again, my opinion on it. And this gets into a very interesting topic because one side will say, we're carrying the message. We are serving our primary purpose. And they are not wrong. And then the other side will say, yeah, but it could be detrimental to the fellowship as a whole. And they are not wrong. So trying to find that middle ground, trying to find that level of commonality, that level of unity can be very difficult, even with decades of clean time and an understanding of the traditions, because one person's reality and one person's perspective and one person's experience shapes their perception of things. Whereas somebody else's perspective, somebody else's reality, somebody else's perception is shaped for that same topic in a different direction. And it doesn't mean either one of them is wrong. So this is where it can get difficult. It can get to that next level of confusion at times. But it's okay. Because it allows us to grow. It allows us to walk through conflict, and it allows people to find what they need when they need it. And hopefully it's not detrimental to the fellowship as a whole. And, people are getting to a meeting and are being saved. And, my personal opinion on something doesn't matter within that. It just doesn't. At the end of the day, groups have that autonomy. And there's no way to really say one way or the other, is this hurting, the fellowship as a whole? My opinion, it is. But my opinion is my opinion. Just like the opinion on the other side is no, it's not. So it gets very dicey. It gets very tricky. It's a whole another level of stuff. But, it's so important within recovery that we start to look at how our decisions can affect others and how our group's decision can affect others as well. And have that thought process and those conversations prior to doing it. And that can be difficult for a lot of us addicts because a lot of us are like, we have this idea, we think it's great, let's do it. Rather than looking at all of the sides of it. I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. I'm a passionate type of dude. I get tied up into things and I'm start thinking, okay, this is what we need to do. But then when we can sit and have that conversation with others, we can realize that, wow, that's what I thought we needed to do. But really, that's not serving the greater good. That's not serving the primary purpose. So being able to have those conversations is evidence, of recovery working. What it says in the literature, it says, if we do not, we do not dictate to other groups or force anything upon them. And if we consider the consequences of our actions ahead of time, then all will be well. Again, that's sometimes difficult for addicts. We don't always think about all the consequences. Somebody like me, sometimes you don't think about any of the consequences. And that's not a good way to live. But, I'm going to close with this quote. And it says that group autonomy has made it possible for this program to transcend countless languages and cultural barriers to help addicts find recovery. And that is one of the most beautiful things about the fellowship. The fact that there is a meeting in the Middle East that is in a soccer stadium attended by 10,000 addicts in a Muslim country. Why? Because that group had autonomy to adapt the fellowship and recovery within their culture, within a way that people felt comfortable, felt safe, felt loved unconditionally, and given their own creative freedom to grow and recover. And that, to me, whew, yeah, that's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. So that's what we got for tradition number 4. Next week, we're going to be on to tradition 5. Tradition 5 is a good one. I really like tradition 5. There's a lot to it. So that's what we got. That's what we're doing. We're about to leave the lab. Let's hang up our lab coat. Let's take our safety goggles off. And let's head on to my favorite moment of the week. All right. I really need to get an intro sound for this segment because I always need to get a drink in between those segments. I need something to fill that time. So that is a goal for this next week. So we are now into the second segment of the show, which is called My Favorite Moment of the Week. This is the time of the show where we just talk about something that occurred over the last week. It might be from sports, pop culture, news, social media. It might be my favorite Instagram or TikTok video that I am not watching on my own and have not signed up for yet. I will be on Pornhub before I am on TikTok. Just for today. All right. It might be anything. Just something that's occurred. And because I like talking a lot and I'm far too indecisive to pick one thing, we talk about my favorite moments of the week because you know why? This is my show. Well, and I get to do what I want.
That part.
Yeah. So I'm super hyped today. I'm wilding out today. I don't even know why, but I'm wilding out. So this is my experience, strength, and hope, but it's got a lot of my opinion. We aren't talking about any specific fellowship approved anything in here. We're just talking. So what were my favorite things of the week? Well, I got to escape the heat of Arizona, headed up to Flagstaff, which is a couple hours north, And it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. Just getting to escape the 100 degrees for the 70 degrees. Beautiful. Even though I ended up with a nail in my brand new tires. Whatever, life on life's terms. Beautiful. Gotta say, one of my absolute things was feeling back home at my home group. As we discussed a few times on here, it's been a weird process of getting back into, in-person meetings and back into my home group and dealing with what I feel safe and okay with post-pandemic. And I can't really say post-pandemic because it's still going on, but whatever the acceptable term is for that, we're progressing into this next segment of reality. And trying to figure out what that is it's been a difficult thing. But being able to feel comfortable in the meeting because there weren't a lot of people, and I felt good wearing my mask and seeing some people back there that hadn't been there in a while, having that in-person connection, having that when you're sharing and you see other people's reactions as opposed to just talking at a camera into a microphone, which is weird because I've gotten really used to talking to a microphone in front of a camera. So it's really, even that is I feel like a newcomer in a lot of ways, but it was a beautiful thing. And, one of my really good friends got to celebrate a year, and it was great. Then we went out to get some burgers afterwards at Habit Burger. Habit Burger, you guys should sponsor me and find some way to have me eat Habit every single day and not gain weight. That would be awesome. Get on that. Also have to say there were some memes that went around. There's this thing where it's the song of if you're motherfucking happy, you motherfucking know, clap your motherfucking hands, and they're playing with cats and dogs. And I literally sat on Instagram Reels for the better part of 45 minutes just watching those videos and dying. Don't know why. It was amazing. Watched a great movie. If you haven't seen Arrival, you probably have because it came out like 5 years ago. But if you haven't, because you were like me and you were too high to care about it, check it out. Great movie. Love Jeremy Renner. Shout out to Hawkeye. Love him. Next step. I had a really, really, really nice day at the gym yesterday. If you saw me walking around right now, you would know that. I feel like I got a little bit of the leg strength back, and I put up 900 pounds on the leg press. Not quite what I was at, but it's the best thing I've done in 15 months in the gym. So yes, I can barely walk, but worth it. Also have to give a shout out to Naomi Osaka because the whole point that she got fined $15,000 for saying she wouldn't speak to the press at the French Open, to me it's really a jumping point, or it should be a launching point for discussion about mental health. Because, technically a professional athlete's job is to play that sport. It doesn't say in the contract you sign, for some sports do, that you are obligated to give this media discussion. And even though the sports that do say that, to me, that just seems kind of like you're just establishing a need for sports journalists. And again, I love sports journalism. It's one of my favorite types of journalism. I consume more sports journalism than pretty much any other type of journalism, especially in today's day and age. So I'm not saying it to disparage journalists, but what of substance is really discussed after somebody wins a game or after somebody loses a game? Hey, LeBron, why'd you guys lose? Well, we didn't have a good team effort. Our energy was low. But we're going to come back next week, or we're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to get them. Oh, hey, LeBron, why'd you guys win? Oh, our energy was great. We had great teamwork. We were well coached. My teammates did a great job, and we won. Can't wait for next game. That is like 95% of sports journalism post-win, post-loss. Is anything mind-blowing really occurring there? Like, for every one cataclysmic hot take that you get, you end up with like 3,000 of those rinse, repeat. I think half the time, all we really care about, we just want to see what people are wearing afterwards. Like, that's turned into such a thing. We just want to see what kind of ridiculous shit Russell Westbrook is going to be wearing to a post-game conference. That's what I think. But it's gotten to the point where now a top tennis player withdraws from one of the biggest tournaments there is because she feels that mentally she can't do the social commit or the media commitments to it. And I understand the reasoning for it. I get it. I understand the reasoning why they want people to talk, because that leads to, clips on SportsCenter. That leads to clips on ESPN.com. I get that. But in the same sense, is it really that necessary? Do we really need somebody like Marshawn Lynch, Mr. Beast Mode, showing up afterwards? Because as he said, I don't feel comfortable talking in front of people. I feel anxious talking in front of people. Some people like talking. I'm one of them. I enjoy talking. Not so much as when I'm in front of a crowd of people, but talking is fun, one-to-one or one into a camera. I'm good with that. But if somebody isn't, why should we be forcing them to do this? And then you get somebody like Marshawn Lynch sitting up there saying, I'm only here so I won't get fined. I'm only here so I won't get fined. Incessantly. Which did create great TV, but that's so pointless. Though I will say, shout out when he got sponsored with Skittles and he just kept eating Skittles the whole time and saying, Skittles taste the rainbow or whatever he said. That was cool. So, I get both sides of it, but, I just want to give her a shout out. I'm glad that you're putting your mental health ahead of, the need to be the best in your sport. So, shout out to that. Also, I'm pretty damn excited. I officially have booked my first post-COVID, post-vaccination venture into the masses. A little bit sketched out about it, I'm not going to lie, but I got my ticket to go see an amazing show by Millennium. I'm really excited about that. So a little scared, but we'll process that. But my favorite moment of the week, my absolute favorite moment of the week, was I was the guest on the Mr. Stutz podcast. And this was fun, man. This was fun. It was fun on so many levels. But I'm going to give a little background. So Mr. Stutz is an addict in recovery as well. He's a fellow indie podcaster. We connected on social media. The beauty of social media. The fact that I could connect with an addict in Ontario, Canada, and he could connect with an addict here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and could come together to carry a message to help people. That is just such a beautiful thing. And it was exciting for me personally because it felt like in some ways it validated what I'm doing here. Like the fact that I, was able to be on another podcast was like to kind of almost legitimize, probably from an ego perspective, probably from a character defect perspective, it legitimized this podcast in a way, if that makes sense. So being able to talk to him about recovery, and it's the beauty of recovery is that we are so different. He works a different fellowship. He uses different language than I do. He's from, his drugs of choice and his story is completely different than mine. Even how we set up our podcast is different. His is based on doing interviews and now getting into doing more solo content, whereas mine has been based on doing solo content, eventually going to do interviews. But we still had that same commonality. We had that same commonality of trying to help others, of trying to share the message and being able, thank you technology and thank you social media for being able to connect with another person, with the beautiful commonality of recovery. And we got to have a fun ass conversation. The interview went for like an hour and 45 minutes. We were talking for damn near 2.5 hours, just vibing, just having fun. And it felt so just good to be able to carry a message to a new audience of people, and now being able to expose my audience to him, and to his podcast. And that is what we do, from a podcasting perspective, from a fellowship perspective, we're here all helping each other out. And it was so cool. And it felt so just like, I don't know, it just felt really cool. Like, I can't say more than that. I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit ego, but it felt really cool to be able to do something like that and to be able to carry this message. I got to say, shout out, brothers. Sorry your Maple Leafs lost, bro. Up 3-1 and then losing in Game 7. That's not the vibe. So, everybody, if you want to check them out, He's on Instagram at MRSTUTTSPOD, Mr. Stutz Pod on Instagram. He's also listed on all podcast directories. I'm pretty sure my episode is going to be uploaded next week. So obviously I'm going to be putting that on all the social medias. So if you want to check that out, make sure to follow me on all the social medias. Again, go to cleanandfilthypodcast.com. Wow, I almost threw out my old email or my old website back in my poker days. Again, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. Like, subscribe on all the social medias so you can be first to hear that. And definitely head over to his podcast. Show him some love. Again, it was so much fun. I'm gratefully eternal for that. I'm eternally grateful. Wow. Eternally grateful. My words aren't wordsing there, apparently.
That part.
But it was a lot of fun. And, really opened up my mind to a lot of ways as to how I could start incorporating guests, different things I can really do within that. And it's pretty exciting. I'm excited about it. So, big shout out to him. And, hopefully one day we'll have him on this show as well. So, again, thank you all for listening to this part of it. This is just my part where I get to vibe out and just talk about what was fun this past week. So, hopefully you guys get something out of it. If you have any moments that pop up, send me those memes on Instagram. Send me those TikToks, not to my personal TikTok because I don't have one yet just for today. But text them to me or email them to me, Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. Please send me those good TikToks, please. Or any other news stories. And you never know. Might be what we talk about on this next episode coming up. So that's what we have for my favorite moment of the week. And now let's get into our next segment.
It's time to Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right. It's time to Ask an Addict. I am an addict, and here's where we answer questions. This is a part of the show where we answer viewer and listener submitted questions. They can be about recovery. They don't have to be about recovery. This is like a Reddit AMA. Ask me anything. And, I share my experience, strength, and hope, and my opinion on it. So, always love the questions. Again, got my Suns hat on for anybody who's listening and can't see. Big game tonight. Big game tonight. We'll see what happens. We got to talk a little bit about playoffs, and I got a great question. It says, who do I think is going to win the NBA Finals? Who's going to make it to the Finals? Who's going to win it? I really want to say the Suns. I really do. The homer in me wants to say that. But if I'm being objective and answering this question without emotion, I'm going to say I don't think the Suns are going to make it. I really don't think Philadelphia is going to either, especially depending on what's going on with Joel Embiid's knee, leg, groin area. I don't think that Philadelphia is going to be able to make it. And I think we saw that they really operate completely with their star player. If the AD injury is a serious injury for the Lakers, I don't think that the Lakers will beat the Suns. I think the Suns will come out, and then I don't know, Utah's going to be tough. I don't think that Utah, even if they made it to the finals, is going to be able to win because I don't think anybody can stop the big three in Brooklyn. Like, how do you stop a team that has three of the top 10 players in the league? We could probably argue this for, nitpicking at points and say it's probably three of the top, 7 players in the league. I'm not going to do that right now because my brain isn't braining to those statistical levels. But how do you stop that? Because even if 2 of those MVP caliber or previous MVPs just shit the bed that day, you still got another one. And then you have a bunch of role players as well. Like, what do you do with that? What do you do to beat that? I don't know. I don't know if anybody can. It's going to be very interesting to see, but I think Brooklyn's going to win it. And as much as that's like a, shout out to Brooklyn, like most people in Brooklyn are fans of the Knicks because they've been around and, the Nets used to be in New Jersey and New Jersey Nets. So that's what I think is going to happen. I don't love that, but I do think that that's probably what's going to happen. So next question we got, it says, when would a group affect the fellowship as a whole? This is actually perfect timing because I got the question when it came in, on tradition 4. And then it also says, how does tradition 4 tie in with other traditions? So there are certain things if we were to come out and say this is the whatever group of that's something, very disparaging. If you were to come out and say this is, the hate group of this fellowship, or the, anti whatever group, like if you want to say the anti-white group of this fellowship, that would be damaging to the fellowship as a whole. That would be something that is not attractive. And even though it might attract certain people, the overall vibe of it is going to be detrimental to the fellowship as a whole. Like if you had a meeting that's like embracing toxic masculinity, or is, like hot, like if you had a meeting that was called like hot bitches only of whatever fellowship, that's not a good look for the fellowship as a whole. That's not something, and even though it might be attractive in that one element, probably to a bunch of dudes, but that's not what the point of it is. While there's that autonomy and that ability to, grow creatively, that is detrimental to the fellowship as a whole. Because if somebody sees that, somebody who maybe is an addict and maybe needs recovery, and they see that title and they're like, what the fuck is that, what's up with that shit? I'm not going to check that out. That's sexist, or that's whatever. If there's something that can be construed negatively, and I know that that's a lot of things in today's day and age. I understand that. But if there are things that are directly negative, have direct negative connotations, that impacts the fellowship as a whole. That's what we have to really look at and try to avoid. Desperately need to try to avoid. Because that's just not what the point of it is. We want everybody to be able to have their own little niche, and we want there to be the creative expression within home groups. But when that expression then turns into detriment towards the fellowship as a whole, then it's not doing the primary purpose. It's not simply carrying the message, without negative connotations, without negative consequences. So that's one of the things that we really have to look at, and that's where it really can affect the fellowship as a whole. And that could be a scary thing, because if it's affecting the fellowship as a whole and now people don't want to be a part of that, that's a very selfish, self-obsessed type of perspective. And a lot of times, as it is a truth, it says in the literature, it says that there's a line I wanted to read regarding selfishness and regarding, seeing like what that self-centered obsession can lead to. It says self-obsession is the core of our disease. And one of the defining features of self-obsession is that we do not see the impact of our actions on the people around us, or we just don't care. And that is a scary thing. I understand, sometimes I don't see the perspective from others. But if I don't care, that speaks to some need for spiritual growth. If I don't care how this could affect others simply because it's what I want, that, in my opinion, speaks to a horrible lack of spirituality. I want to grow. I want to understand other people's opinions. Even if I don't agree with them, I still want to understand them. If somebody's to the point where like, fuck you, I don't give a shit, I don't care, that is just so unspiritual from my opinion of the overall point of recovery. Because I'm not in recovery to not use drugs. I'm in recovery to become a better person, to become more mindful of others, to become more appreciative of other personalities and other thought processes. And if I have a perspective that my way is what matters and I don't care about anybody else, how can that occur? It can't. So, that's something that does happen. And when we don't look at how the overall effect can impact others, we are being very selfish. And I've done that same thing. I get it. It does happen. And it's specifically, tradition 4 ties in, as we discussed earlier, with tradition 2, with tradition 3, and with tradition 5. Tradition 2 from the perspective of not governing. Tradition 3 from the perspective of not judging. As tradition 3 taught us not to judge the member, tradition 4 says don't judge the group. Tradition 2 said don't govern and use group conscience. Tradition 4 says, hey, implement group conscience. That's what guides you. And tradition 5 allows us, and we're going to talk about this so much more next week, to truly define how we're going to carry that message. Because of, our autonomy within the group, because of the fact that we don't judge members, how we're going to carry that, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to get into that next week, though, because that's going to be on tradition 5. So last question, it actually popped up this morning. It was a good discussion. The question was, after looking at some things on Instagram, would I rather have a Ferrari 488 GTB, or as Pusha T would say, the 488? Yuck. Love Pusha T. Or a Lamborghini Huracan Evo all-wheel drive. Okay. Got to break this down. This is something that was a lot more difficult to me than I would have thought, because we all know I'm a Lamborghini guy. I love Lamborghinis. Love them, love them, love them, love them, love them, right? Yes. Said it more times than I can count. Love them. But I don't really, 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 really love the Huracan as much as the Aventador, obviously, or the Centenario, or any of the other ridiculous Venenos and Sions and all that. So we got to look at them we got to break them down here. We got to look at the fact that the Ferrari has 660 horsepower. Lamborghini has 630 or 630 in the Evo. Ferrari's a 3.9 liter twin turbo V8. So weird having, turbo Ferrari engines again. Versus the Lamborghinis, a 5.2 liter naturally aspirated V10. V10s are cool. Still one of my favorite cars of all time is the old M5 that had a V10 engine in it. I really want one of those at some point. The Ferrari is rear-wheel drive. The Lamborghini's all-wheel drive. Now, for the record, the Evo comes in a rear-wheel drive version as well, but for the sake of this argument, I went with the all-wheel drive simply because it equaled out the price, whereas the Ferrari's $262,000 base, the Lamborghini's $261,000 base. Again, that's base. You ain't getting them for that cheap, for the record. Got to look at the 0 to 60 time. Ferrari, 3 seconds flat. Lamborghini, 3.4 seconds. Ferrari gets better gas mileage, but, who fucking cares? Ferrari also has more trunk space, but again, who fucking cares? It's like big enough to put a briefcase in. So who gives a shit about that? So if we're looking at just a straight up 488, which I will say, I've never been a huge fan of the 488. I like the 458 a lot more from a looks perspective. But if we're looking at straight up 488 versus a straight up Huracan EVO, I think I would actually go with the Ferrari. I know, gasps, I know. I actually think I would go with the Ferrari. Because to me, as awesome as it would be to have a Lamborghini, I want that big boy. I want that big boy V12 with the Lambo doors. And I feel like I would, if I had a Huracan, I would feel like I didn't achieve what I really wanted. So it's almost like I by default, I'd rather take the Ferrari until I could get the Lamborghini I really wanted. Plus, I've always loved Ferraris. So, but then when we start breaking it into the next level, that's what we're talking about, straight up stock. But what about if we bring up a special edition Huracan, like an STO? Okay. Now the STO, mind you. First off, it sounds, the name's cool. It's Super Trofeo Olomagato. That just sounds cool. Olomagato. Yeah, STO. Thing is sexy as a motherfucker. Look it up. Just Google it. Just hit the Googles and look up Lamborghini Huracan STO. That blue and orange, oh my goodness. Fucking gorgeous. Okay. Beautiful thing about the STO is now it makes it rear-wheel drive, $327,000 base price. Upstat horsepower to 640 horsepower, 0 to 60, 3 seconds flat. Okay, if we're going 488 GTB or even 488 Spider versus an STO, no question, STO, done, got it, good, gang, gang. But we got to take it another level because this is what I do. This is the type of addict I am. I can't just answer a question. I got to go deeper. I got to go deeper. I got to go deeper. We got to get to deeper levels. Got to go all the way in.
Phrasing?
All the way in. So, what about if we take that STO that we just described in all its luscious beauty and compared it with a Ferrari 488 Pista, which that's a fun name as well. The Pista. I love it. Okay, what's up with the Pista, you ask? Well, it takes cues from two of my favorite past Ferraris. One of them being the 430 Scuderia, and the other being the 458 Especiale. The Pista is wider, lower, and lighter than the 488 GTB. It goes 0 to 60 in 2.85 seconds. And it's 710 horsepower, comes with a $330,000 price tag. And in my opinion, they have taken all of the styling things I didn't like about the 488 and made them gorgeous. Gorgeous. So what would I do? Pista, STO. And I can tell you that in about the 45 minutes I was sitting getting ready to go live for this episode, I was thinking and looking at pictures and looking at interiors and reading more specs and then rereading those specs. And after all said and done, I think I would have to go with the STO because there's just something about the design work of it that is for sure the most beautiful non-12 cylinder Lamborghini of all time, my opinion. And the extra engine power and the super race car vibe of it is what takes it over the top for me. Whereas the Pista is an amazing car and probably an equal, if not maybe better driving car, but that racing pedigree of the STO is what takes it for me. So that's what we're saying. So anybody out there, Lamborghini of Scottsdale, if you hear this, holla at your boy. We'll do an episode from the inside of a Lamborghini Huracan STO. Get some co-marketing here. Or maybe we could just like slap a Clean and Filthy podcast sticker on the back of that STO. That'd be fire.
It's lit.
So that's what we got for my questions this week. If you have a question that you want to have answered on the air, please send it over to me. Again, you can send it directly at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or send it over on any of the social medias. You can even just send it over off the website. We got an entire Contact Us page that nobody ever uses. So it'd be cool if people started using it. So please do that. So that is what we got. Answer more questions next week. Thank you, as always, for the questions. I love answering questions way more than I should, but I do. So we are almost out of time, but you know we can't close without them Clean Time shout-outs. This is the part of the show where we recognize various lengths of Clean Time accomplishments. We're talking about the ones that are universally recognized. So that means newcomer, which is 29 days clean or less, 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, or multiple years clean. But we like to change it up a little bit and give them extra shout outs for some other big numbers. So 100 days, 500 days, 1,000 days, anything like that. We like to give shout-outs because I like giving shout-outs. I love celebrating people's clean time. We talked about it previously, that celebrating clean time to me is one of the most enjoyable and fun things that we do in recovery. And it gets me so damn hyped, man. It gets me so hyped. So before we go any further, if you do have any clean time between now and next week's episode, please send it over to me so we can get you a shout-out next week. But now let's get to these ones. First and foremost, coming back. I'm so glad you made it back, my brother. As a newcomer, we got Ethan. Yeah. So happy to see you at the meeting, man. You don't even know. I was so happy. And next up with 30 days, we've got Lore. Well done. And with 30 days, we've got Kimberly. Yeah. And with 30 days, we've got Braxton. Hell yeah. Then with 60 days, we've got my boy out in Vegas, Rhett. Well done. And then with 60 days, we got my boy Vince. Well done. Hope you're recovering well from that surgery, my brother. Then with 90 days, we've got Mark. Well done. Different Mark than the other one I shout out. Then with 6 months, we've got Joe. Also different Joe. I got to start putting some last initials in here. And then with 1 year clean, we've got Kate. Well done, Kate. And with 2 years clean, we've got Alex, now Alex W. Well done. Next with 2 years clean, we've got Peter. And then we've got Alex B with 6 years clean. And now we got to reload. Because with 18 years clean, 18, we got my boy Bill. Yeah. Well done, yo. Well done. Shout out to everybody who got that clean time. Shout out today. And if you didn't, don't use. And guess what? You will. That's literally how it works. So again, if you have any clean time coming up between now and next week's episode, make sure to send me a message so I can get you a clean time shout out. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love celebrating people's clean time. So also, if you wouldn't mind, send your last initial as well when you send it over so I can start differentiating because we're starting to get some repeats of names. And I want to make sure everybody gets their proper shout out. So we are officially out of time, y'all. Thank you for another great episode. Crazy that we are officially through 16 episodes. That's absolutely nuts. And I couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. So I love each and every one of you. If nobody's told you they love you today, I love you. Thank you for being a part of my recovery. Thank you for giving me the privilege of being able to carry this message. And I hope that you heard something that you liked. If you did, please make sure to share it. Like, share, subscribe, tweet, retweet, comment, thumbs up, all that. That's how we grow. And I love all of you. Thank you so much for the support. Huge thank you again to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily. Check her out below. Huge thank you to our wonderful music that's playing in my ears, and I love it. Anything by Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland. Thank you very much. And you know, I always say I can't do this alone, but we can do this together. So thank you for helping me, and I'll see you.
I just wanna feel anything.